Since its release, the Sinnis Akuma 125 has been renowned for the captivating look that distinguishes it from comparable modern monkey bikes. Now, what's noticeable about the Akuma is the fact that the bike features a fresh and contemporary blacked out design. And, well, its sophisticated bodywork colours take the class to a whole new level. Now, it's no surprise that the Akuma is one of the most popular 125 motorcycles on the market because it's priced at a really competitive rate. What's really interesting is that the Akuma significantly undercuts many of its competitors. After experiencing the bike, I'm going to be honest, I was really impressed. You see, the ride quality and handling are nothing short of fun. And sure, it may not be the most rapid bike on the market, but it's got more than enough power for a great ride out, and not too much that you're going to get caught out by the Welsh police. Now, the Akuma is a great ideal jumpstart bike for any beginner, and it instills confidence when riding, and that's precisely what you want in terms of a bike. Now, of course, it's always worth talking about heights when it comes to this style of bike. And I guess it's worth talking about the fact that I am 5'7", and this is an incredibly small motorcycle. And so when it comes to riding on the road, it is very much a knees up situation because it's just so incredibly small. But I'm going to be honest, although the bike is particularly small in size, in terms of height off the ground, there's actually quite a lot of leanway. And just to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about, so if we go ahead and stand upright. So what I anticipated was very much a situation where I'm effectively, I've got too much leg room. But actually, because of the clearance from the ground, it's not bad. The height is still less than optimal, but that's also part of the nature of this style of bike, and it's also part of the fun too. Now, I've always had a soft spot for monkey bikes because there's just something incredibly endearing about their goofball appearance and silly attitude that somehow just resonates a little bit with me. I don't know why. Now let's talk a little bit about the specs of the bike. The 2022 Akuma houses an 11 horsepower air-cooled engine and a 5-speed gearbox, mirroring the specs on countless other Sinnis motorcycles. Now, as it is the standard with Chinese engines, this particular bike draws a lot of inspiration from Japanese units, and most people have likened it to the Suzuki DR125, which was launched in the early 90s. Now, the Akuma is an incredible lightweight bike, and it's clocking in at just 125 kilos. And that's when it's fully fueled and ready to roll. That's 10 kilograms less than the previous model, which means that it's pretty easy to pick up, guys, and I did have to pick it up a few times. But what's more important about this is because it's so lightweight, although it's only got a 125 engine, it's so incredibly nippy. And the acceleration on it is just really quick. Going around Wales and going around the twisties, it was just utterly phenomenal. Like, it was just so much fun. And part of that as well is just down to the fact that they've incorporated larger wheels in the previous model. Now, when it comes to the 2022 Akuma, they did see a little bit of an upgrade in terms of applying 14-inch wheels, which is a little bit of an upgrade from the previous 12. And effectively what this meant was that the bike benefited from some enhanced agility. And I definitely saw that in terms of going around the roads and going around those short, tight corners. Now, I am not the best when it comes to cornering. I'm just terrible at it. Like, it's not a strength of mine. But on this bike, I was pretty good. I was pretty good at this. I was like leaning a little bit, probably less than I thought I was. But overall, because the bike is just so agile, it just worked. It just worked. Now, obviously, because it's a 125 engine, you're not going to be keeping up with the big guys on the road. And in terms of areas like Wales, I don't really think that's so much of a problem because, number one, you never really get your speed up high enough to kind of see that as a negative. And number two, the vast majority of Wales is just so rural and rugged that it doesn't really matter even if you can't get your speed up. You're going to be hitting potholes sooner or later. And so for like riding around in those rural areas with those twisty roads, this really excelled. Like, it did so well. Now, where it didn't do well on is that straight line long distance, high speed situations. Now, obviously I didn't take it on the motorway because I don't have a death wish, but we do have some A roads which are effectively motorway speeds that I took it up and down, and it did not do so well. And it particularly did not do well in that environment when there was potholes. Now, a lot of people talked about how part of the reason the Sinnis Akuma performs so well is the fact that it has some decent suspension and low center of gravity. And I'll agree with the low center of gravity. However, what I found was that actually the bike didn't really do so well in terms of the suspension. And when I was going down those patchwork roads, it was quite painful. It was quite painful. I didn't enjoy it. And there were some circumstances where I had a little bit of a heart flutter going on because I just didn't know if the bike would be okay afterwards. And it was fine, to be fair, it was fine. But I think the suspension isn't the best. But also this isn't the bike that you're looking for great suspension in. It's a fun little zippy run around, you know, it's the kind of bike you want to run up and down the road to, maybe do a little bit of a commute on, and just kind of have a little bit of mischief that won't necessarily land you in trouble with the law. It's not really made for the areas that you need suspension. So, you know, I can't really criticize it. It's not what it's designed for. Now, realistically, when it comes to the Akuma and the amount of power that it outputs, there are bikes on the market that do deliver more power in the same category bracket as the Akuma. However, looking online, it does seem like this bike is between 20 to 30% cheaper than its competitors from new. And so, yeah, whilst you could get a more powerful machine, you would pay for it. And if you're someone who's looking for a particular style of bike within a set budget, this is probably going to be more affordable. And although you might have to forego a little bit of power, if this is ultimately what you could afford, then, you know, why wouldn't you do it? And ultimately, you know, this is something I constantly push with you guys. It's more about the type of bikes that you can afford rather than the type of bike you can own, because ultimately that's what helps you get on the road and that's what gets you into motorcycling. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter what you're riding as long as you're enjoying what you're riding. So the next thing that I'm going to be touching on is just the gear changes. Now, I always try to comment on things like, you know, how it feels to change the gear on the bike, and I'm going to be completely honest, the gearbox was fine. I don't really have any comments positive or negative. It kind of worked. It did what it was supposed to do. But what I will say is that very rarely I didn't notice I was in the correct gear, and I didn't really think it made a difference. So obviously Sinnis upgraded the tyre size on the 2022 model. However, the tyres are still incredibly small for a motorcycle. So small, in fact, that I came very, very close to tanking it on a cattle grid in Wales. Now, this is more to do with my stupidity than the actual bike. Slippy gate. Slippy gate. Oh. Okay, note to self. Oh my god. But this is kind of a similar situation I've been in on my SV650 a million times and never had any problems. I know that I hit the grid at an angle and obviously it caused me to wobble a little bit, but I do think part of that was down to the fact that these tyres are so tiny. And the other issue I had as well is that I did end up basically stopping off in some side road mud just to check my sat nav, you know how it is. And I couldn't get the bike back out again. I had to like get off it and like push it out because it was just so difficult and slightly embarrassing because some cyclists were coming up the hill and they were looking at me, and overall it was great fun, but also a bit of a pain. Now, when it comes to the seating position of the Akuma, it is very much forward facing, and for most people that's uncomfortable. It's slightly more than a sit up and beg bike, but honestly it's a lot less than the sports bike that I rode the month before. I personally got on fine with it. I didn't really notice too much of an issue. I think my main complaint about this bike, and again, this probably isn't the bike you want to be taking on tours for multiple days, but I think my biggest complaint is just the fact that there wasn't anywhere for me to like tie down a bag. I think it's very much the case that this bike is a day trip kind of motorcycle and a day trip bike only. Interestingly enough, the weirdest thing that occurred to me when I was riding this bike was just like how much distance there was between me and the vehicle in front, because the body is just so incredibly short up front. you kind of feel like you're riding over the front wheel. And you know, the first time that I took this bike out and also like pulling up to traffic lights and stopping behind cars, it was a little bit intimidating. Like, it really freaked me out. I mean, after the first like 50 meters, I did get used to it and it was fine. But like, if this is the first time you've ever like rode a smaller bike like that, it's such a strange sensation. It's so incredibly strange and it's really freaky. But again, you do get used to it eventually, so. And of course, guys, not ignoring the obvious, it would not be a review without drawing attention to this absolutely magnificent exhaust on the rear. But it's just, oh, it's so beautiful. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, the contrast between like the bold silhouette and also the finish of the pipes, oh, it kind of looks like a cat claw. You know, it looks very mischievous. And I love it. I really love this look. And the sound as well, it wasn't bad. It does turn heads, and it turns heads because it's basically a goofball on wheels. Some people are going to love it and some people are going to hate it. I personally really like silly motorcycles, and so this kind of bike is definitely down my street and definitely my kind of cup of tea. I just really like this kind of stuff. It's really fun, it's really silly, but I can appreciate that that's not for everyone. Some people do like to take biking a little bit more seriously and they want a machine that matches their personality. And if you're quite a serious person, I could envision that this isn't quite the bike for you, and you know, you might want to end up purchasing something like a sports bike. But I personally love it, but I'm also a big goofball, so of course I'm going to love it. So the last thing that I am going to touch on is the tech of the bike. What it does have is effectively a screen up front with multiple different color options to change the background to suit your preference. And of course it has all the usual things like your trip, your speed, your mileage, all that kind of jargon. But outside of that, there isn't really a lot to play with. That's pretty much the extent of what you're getting. But ultimately, again, as I said before, you can't have everything in a bike. You can't have an affordable bike and also a bike with every gadget and gizmo. You need to pick what is important to you and then follow that. So, you know, it's all about compromise, and if you're looking for a cheaper machine, compromising with some of those tech gadgets is unavoidable. Now, there we have it, guys. That is my review of the Sinnis Akuma 125. I had so much fun on this bike, and I probably got up to a little bit more mischief than I should have. However, this bike has definitely made my top 10 bikes for 2023, not because it's all singing and all dancing, but just because it's a really goofy machine. And honestly, it reminded me the first few months I got my license when it was just utter chaos. I can appreciate that's not for everyone, but it is a lot of fun. And I definitely would recommend taking this style of bike out at least for a demo ride. And you'll see what I mean about just being really fun and really chaotic. It's just fun. It's just a great experience, guys. Now, if you guys do want to see more great bike content, don't forget to hit subscribe. And in the meantime, ride safe, stay crazy. I'll see you next week. My name's Sophie Sprocket, signing off.